He was a millionaire CEO enjoying a perfect dinner, until a small, trembling voice asked him for change. In that single moment, comfort collided with conscience, and one quiet decision began to rewrite two lives forever. What happens next is not about money, it is about courage, kindness, and the choice that defines who we truly are. Stay with this story to the end, because the moment he almost ignored became the moment that changed everything. Before we dive into this incredible story, do not forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss our powerful, life-changing content. That I sat at the corner table where the light felt gentle and expensive. Crystal glasses cooled my fingertips with quiet elegance. The restaurant breathed confidence through velvet chairs and low music. Butter melted on my tongue with rosemary and calm certainty that I carried my success like a perfectly measured heartbeat. Outside, rain traced silver lines down the tall window. Each drop sounded far away from my warm plate. And steady life. The door opened and the air changed its mind. Cold dampness slipped inside with the smell of the street. That I looked up without planning to. She stood near the entrance, small against tall coats and glass. Her jacket looked borrowed from a harder season. Her shoes barely touched the floor, as if asking permission. That I in her hands, a paper cup shook with thin metallic sound. Her eyes moved from table to table, learning courage with every step. When she walked toward me, the room seemed to quiet itself. Her voice arrived softly, shaped by practice and fear. She asked for some change. The words landed heavier than any bill I ever signed. Time slowed between the clink of cutlery and my breath. That I noticed a faint scrape on her knee. Still healing. That I smelled rain on her hair and soap from a public sink. That my chest tightened with a memory I never invited. That I remembered being young and invisible in crowded places. That I remembered hunger pretending to be patience. The waiter stopped moving, watching. From a distance, other guests stared at their plates as if food demanded attention. That my meal cooled, forgotten, while heat rose behind my eyes. That I felt the weight of my watch and the emptiness of her cup. Wealth felt suddenly loud and uncomfortable on my wrist. Her fingers gripped the cup with careful strength. That I reached for my wallet and hesitated, not from doubt, but from understanding. Coins could speak, but they could also fall silent too quickly. Her eyes searched my face for meaning, not money. Rain struck the window harder, like a reminder. The lights above us flickered once and steadied. That in that fragile moment, my world narrowed to her breathing. That I placed my hand close to hers, slow and deliberate. The cup stopped trembling. Her shoulders loosened just enough to hope. That my pulse thundered as if a door inside me had opened. The room leaned closer, listening. That I realized this was not a request for change. This was a test of who I chose to remain. That I inhaled deeply, feeling the cost of comfort and the price of care. That my fingers moved, guided by something older than success. The silence thickened, waiting for my next choice. My fingers hovered above the open wallet, aware of every sound. Leather creaked softly like a confession. The smell of food no longer mattered. All I felt was the space between us. That I chose bills instead of coins, slow and visible. Her eyes widened, then softened, then guarded themselves again. That I placed the money into the cup with care. Paper brushed paper with a quiet promise. The cup felt lighter in my hand than it should have. Her breath caught, sharp and quick. She whispered thank you, but her voice carried years. That I nodded, unable to speak. The waiter stepped closer, uncertainty on his face. That I lifted my hand and he stopped. The restaurant noise returned in cautious waves, yet the moment stayed suspended around us. She did not leave right away. She stood there, studying me as if memorizing a map. That I noticed her knuckles red from cold. That I noticed how still she tried to be. I asked her name, gently. She told me, barely above the rain. That it sounded like something fragile and strong at once. That I asked if she was hungry. Her eyes answered before her mouth. That I pushed my plate toward her, untouched and warm. She hesitated, trained by rules made of fear. That I smiled, slow and open. She sat on the edge of the chair, ready to flee. Steam rose between us like a fragile bridge. She took one bite and closed her eyes. That small movement struck me harder than loss. That I felt the years of work and sacrifice twist inside my chest. That I had built towers of success and missed moments like this. Rain continued to drum against the glass. The city breathed outside, unaware. She ate carefully, respectfully, as if honoring the food. That I watched her hand stop shaking. Warmth returned to her cheeks. The silence between us grew full instead of empty. That I asked where her mother was. She looked down at the table. Her fingers traced a scratch in the wood. The answer lived in her shoulders. Pain settled in the space between my ribs. That I listened without interrupting. That I listened as if listening could change something. Her story unfolded in pieces, careful and honest. Each word carried weight and courage. The room faded again. All that remained was her voice and my attention. That I felt something shift, permanent and demanding. The kind of shift no success could soften. That I realized that leaving would not be simple anymore. That I realized that staying meant responsibility. The rain slowed, but the night deepened. She looked at me as if waiting for another choice. I felt the weight of that look settle into my bones. The table felt smaller, closer, real. That I asked where she planned to go after the rain stopped. She shrugged, a gesture learned too early. Her cup rested between us like a fragile truth. That I heard the low murmur of the restaurant return again. Glasses clinked, someone laughed too loudly, yet her silence spoke over everything. That I signaled the waiter again. Slower this time. That I asked for soup and bread, warm and simple. She watched the steam rise as if it were a promise. Her hands relaxed on her knees. That I told her she could take her time. Time felt like something I finally owned. She told me about school she missed and books she loved. Her words carried hope stitched into hardship. That I listened with my whole body. That I felt the chair beneath me, the floor, the solid ground. That I realized how rarely I felt grounded. The soup arrived and she smiled without meaning to. That smile stayed with me like light. She ate slowly, tasting safety. That I noticed how carefully she thanked the waiter. Kindness lived in her like a quiet fire. That I wondered who had taught her that. That I asked where she slept. Her answer came after a pause that stretched. She spoke of places that changed often. That of nights wrapped in coats and waiting. That my throat tightened, but my voice stayed steady. That I told her she was brave. She looked surprised by the word. As if no one had said it aloud before. The rain softened into a steady whisper. Streetlights blurred into gold outside the window. That I felt a decision forming. Without fear, not fast, not loud, but firm. That I asked if she trusted me enough to listen. She studied my face again, carefully, her eyes searched for cracks. That I stayed still and open. She nodded once. That nod felt heavier than any contract. That I leaned closer, lowering my voice. That I spoke about help, real help, not moments. Her breath slowed as she listened. Hope flickered, cautious and alive. The room seemed to hold us gently now. That I knew this night would not release me easily. That I knew something had already begun. I felt the beginning settle into my chest like a quiet oath. That I asked her if she felt safe right now. She nodded, then hesitated, then nodded again. That hesitation told me more than certainty ever could. That I told her my name, not my title. She repeated it softly, testing how it sounded. That I asked who waited for her outside. She shook her head, slow and careful. The chair across from me felt suddenly empty and loud. That I asked if anyone knew she was here. Her eyes lowered to the table edge. The answer lived in that small movement. That I felt the room press closer again. That I asked the waiter for tea, extra sugar. That I wanted warmth to stay longer. She wrapped her hands around the cup when it arrived. Steam touched her face like kindness. She sighed without realizing it. That I noticed how her shoulders dropped a little more. That I told her she could rest here for a while. That I said no one would hurry her. The restaurant lights glowed softer as the evening deepened. She told me about her drawings, about lines and colors and stories she made on scraps of paper. Her voice grew steadier with each sentence. That I saw a future hiding inside her words. That I felt something ache behind my ribs. That I thought about offices filled with glass and distance. That I thought about how small choices become turning points. That I asked if she trusted promises. She answered with a quiet question of her own. Her eyes asked what kind. That I told her about promises that arrived slowly. Promises built from actions and mornings. She listened like someone learning a new language. The rain finally stopped. Silence replaced it, thick and expectant. Cars passed outside, unaware of us. That I felt the night hold its breath again. That I realized leaving her was now unthinkable. That I realized staying meant changing everything. She watched my face as if reading the decision form. That I let her see it. That I did not look away. The future stood close, patient and unfinished. The unfinished future pressed gently against the present moment. That I felt it in the quiet space between our breaths. That I asked if she had ever felt truly seen. She thought for a long moment. Her fingers traced the rim of the cup again. She said, not like this. Those words stayed with me, heavy and clear. That I told her that being seen could be a beginning, not a miracle, not an escape, but a path. She listened as if holding fragile glass. That I asked about tomorrow. She spoke of uncertainty without drama. Of waking up and deciding where to belong for the day. That my chest tightened with a slow, steady ache. That I realized how much strength uncertainty demands. The waiter passed by again, softer now. That he placed bread on the table without asking. She thanked him with her eyes. That I noticed how kindness recognized itself. That I leaned back and felt the chair support me fully. Support felt like a lesson I had ignored. That I asked her what made her feel calm. She said drawing by a window. She said listening to rain. That I glanced at the glass, still wet with memory. That I told her she could draw anytime she wished. She looked at me, questioning. That I explained slowly, carefully, with truth. I spoke about choices that opened doors instead of closing nights. Her breathing deepened as if aligning with mine. The room seemed warmer than before. Time passed without announcing itself. That I noticed the clock only when it no longer mattered. She shifted in her chair, less guarded now. That I asked if she felt tired. She nodded, honest and unafraid. That I felt a protective instinct rise. calm and firm, that I told her that rest mattered. That rest was not a reward, but a right. She absorbed that quietly. The city lights outside shimmered, distant and alive, that I felt the old rhythm of ambition slow. Something gentler took its place, that I asked if she would walk with me for a moment. Not far, just together. She considered, then agreed. She stood and waited for me. That waiting felt like trust in motion, that I reached for my coat and felt different inside it. The night waited beyond the door, open and unwritten. I opened the door and the night stepped closer. Cool air brushed our faces with quiet honesty. The street smelled clean after rain. She stood beside me, small but steady, neon lights reflected in shallow puddles like scattered stars, that I matched my steps to hers, that we walked without hurry. Cars passed, unaware of the shift taking place, that I asked if the city ever felt kind to her. She answered that kindness appeared in pieces, that warm hands, that shared food, that moments like this. Her words moved slowly, choosing truth over comfort, that I felt pride rise without permission, that we stopped beneath a street lamp. Lights spilled around us in a soft circle, that I asked where she wanted to go next. She looked up at the buildings, then back at me. Her answer stayed careful, anywhere that did not disappear by morning. The weight of that wish settled deep, that I nodded, accepting it fully, that I told her we would take one step at a time. Steps that could be counted and trusted. She seemed to breathe easier with that. The city hummed around us, distant and patient, that I noticed how she stayed close, but not clinging. Trust moved at her pace, that we crossed the street when the light changed. The sound of our footsteps echoed briefly, that I asked about her favorite color. She smiled at the simplicity of the question. She said blue, like quiet skies, that I told her blue was strong and calm. She considered that, then nodded, that we passed a closed bookstore with posters in the window. She slowed, eyes lingering, that I made a note inside myself. Windows held meaning for her. We walked on, the night stretching ahead, that I felt the responsibility settle comfortably now, not heavy, but real. She glanced at me as if checking that I was still there, that I met her look and stayed. The city breathed around us. The path forward remained open and unfinished. The unfinished path seemed to glow faintly under the streetlights, that I felt the city soften its edges as we walked. My shoes touched the pavement with a sound I rarely noticed before. She stepped around a puddle with practiced care. I slowed so she did not need to adjust. That small choice felt important, that we passed a bus stop where the bench was still wet. She glanced at it, then away. Memories moved behind her eyes, that I did not ask yet, that I learned that patience could speak, that a warm breeze carried the smell of bread from a nearby bakery. Her stomach made a quiet sound and she smiled, embarrassed, that I smiled back, normalizing hunger. We paused near a window glowing with yellow light. Inside, people talked and planned their tomorrows. She watched them with curiosity, not envy, that I realized she imagined herself there someday. That imagining mattered, that I asked what she liked to draw most. She answered without hesitation, hands, hands holding, hands helping, hands not letting go. The answer struck me gently and firmly, that I looked at my own hands and saw them differently. They had signed papers and closed deals. They could also open doors. That we walked again, slower now. The night wrapped around us like a quiet agreement, that I told her that tomorrow could start with breakfast, a real one, warm and shared. She listened closely, measuring truth, that I did not rush her belief. A car splashed through a puddle nearby. She startled, then steadied herself, that I stayed present and calm. Safety sometimes arrived as steadiness. That we reached a quieter street. The noise faded behind us, that I felt the distance from my old evening grow. The restaurant felt like another life. She asked me why I stopped to listen. The question surprised me with its simplicity, that I searched for an answer that respected her. That I said because ignoring pain had cost me too much already. She accepted that without judgment. Acceptance felt rare and valuable. That we stopped again, not because we needed to, but because it felt right. The streetlight buzzed softly above us. That I sensed another choice approaching, not urgent, but necessary. That I inhaled slowly, ready to speak again. That I exhaled and felt the air steady my voice. That I asked if she felt cold. She nodded, honest and small. That I slipped my coat from my shoulders. The fabric still carried warmth from me. That I placed it around her carefully. She froze for a moment, then relaxed. The coat looked too big, but right. She held the edges as if holding proof. That we stood there, quiet and close. The street hummed with distant motion. That a train horn sounded far away. That it echoed through the spaces between buildings. She asked me where I lived. That I described rooms filled with light and silence, rooms that waited more than they welcomed. She listened, curious, thoughtful. That I realized how empty comfort could feel. That I asked her what scared her most at night. She answered after a pause, being forgotten. The word landed softly and stayed. That I felt a pressure behind my eyes again. That I told her forgetting was a choice, and remembering could also be a choice. She watched my face closely. Trust measured itself in seconds. A siren passed in the distance. She stepped closer without touching. That I stayed still, Grounded that I asked if she had identification. She shook her head. Her world lived without papers that I thought about. Systems and doors and rules that I thought about how slowly they moved that I promised myself to move faster that we began walking again. Our shadows stretched long ahead of us. She followed the shadows with her eyes that I asked what she saw in them. She said they looked like people holding hands. That image stayed with me that we approached a building with lights still on. The glass reflected us together. For a moment, I saw us from the outside that a man and a child standing between nights. The reflection felt unreal and urgent. She squeezed the coat tighter that I asked if she trusted me enough for the next step. She did not answer right away. She looked at the door, then at the street behind us, then back at me. Her silence carried weight and hope. The moment waited, open and fragile. I stayed quiet and let the moment breathe. The door light reflected in her eyes like a question that I told her that no answer was also an answer. That waiting was allowed. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other. The night air moved gently around us that I heard my own heartbeat. Steady and present, she finally nodded. Small and careful, not full agreement, but permission to continue that I reached for the handle and paused that I wanted her to see every movement. Transparency felt important now. The door opened with a soft sound. Warm air reached out to us. She stepped closer to me without realizing it that I guided her inside with a gesture, not a push. The hallway smelled of clean floors and quiet lives. Her shoulders relaxed a little that I noticed how light changed her face. Less shadow, more child that we stopped just inside that I told her we could leave anytime. She looked around slowly. Her fingers brushed the wall as if learning it that I asked what she felt. She said it felt still felt good. Footsteps echoed somewhere above. A door closed far away. Life continued around us. Ordinary and real that I realized how powerful ordinary safety could be that I asked if she wanted water. She nodded that I poured it slowly, listening to the sound. She watched the glass fill as if watching balance return. She drank carefully, savoring each swallow that I saw tension leave her hands that I felt something ease inside me too that I asked about her drawings again. She described one she never finished. A house with lights on in every window. She never decided who lived inside that I understood why that I told her houses could change occupants. She smiled faintly at that. The hallway clock ticked softly. Time felt different here. Not chasing, not demanding. She leaned against the wall, tired but calmer that I felt the night outside loosen its grip that I knew questions would come next. Hard ones, necessary ones that I prepared myself to stay present. She looked up at me, eyes steady now. She asked what happens after tonight. The question opened something wide and unfinished. The question hovered between us like a held breath that I did not answer quickly that I respected the weight of after that I told her that after tonight could be built carefully, piece by piece, morning by morning. She listened, studying each word that I said. Nothing would be forced, nothing hidden, nothing taken away without explanation. Her shoulders eased against the wall that I saw how fatigue softened her face that I asked if she wanted to sit. She nodded and followed me into a small room. A lamp glowed with gentle light. The couch waited, simple and clean. She sat on the edge at first. Readiness still lived in her muscles that I sat across from her. Not too close. Space mattered that I told her about people whose work was to help children, people who listened before they decided, people who knew how to protect without erasing. Her eyes searched for fear and found calm instead that I told her she would be part of every choice, that her voice would not disappear. She held the cup of water with both hands. The glass no longer shook. She asked if I would stay. The question surprised me with its softness that I answered yes without hesitation that I said I was already here. That answer seemed to settle something deep. She leaned back slowly. Her head rested against the cushion. Her eyelids grew heavy but alert that I watched her breathe. Even and real. Outside, the city moved on. Inside, time stretched and slowed that I felt the old urgency of power fade. This moment asked for patience, not control. She spoke again, voice quieter now. She asked if mornings could be quiet too. That I told her mornings could be whatever we made them. She smiled, small and honest. The lamp hummed softly. The night felt less sharp that I knew plans would need courage and work, paperwork, conversations, resistance that I welcomed the weight of it. She closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them. Trust still watched from behind them that I stayed still so it could remain. The story continued to unfold, unhurried and alive. The unhurried unfolding felt steady and real that I noticed how the room held her. Without demand that I asked if she wanted a blanket. She nodded once, eyes half closed that I placed it over her carefully. The fabric settled like a promise. She adjusted it on her own. That independence mattered that I sat back and listened to the quiet. The clock continued its patient work. Her breathing found a slower rhythm that I spoke softly about tomorrow again, not as a plan, but as a possibility. She listened even with heavy eyelids that I told her about sunlight through windows, about warm bread and clean paper for drawing. Her fingers moved slightly. As if sketching in air that I asked what she wanted most right now. She answered rest. The words sounded earned that I told her rest was allowed here. She closed her eyes longer this time that I stayed where I was. Presence felt like the right currency that a sound from the street rose and faded. She stirred, then settled again that I noticed how trust grew in inches. Not leaps, not declarations. Just staying that I thought about the work ahead, phone calls before sunrise, meetings with meaning, explaining choices without hiding motives that I felt ready for all of it. She opened her eyes again, checking that I met her gaze immediately that I was still there. That seemed to ease her. She asked if people could really change. The question carried history that I answered that change required courage and witnesses. Sometimes children became the witnesses. She considered that quietly. The lamp cast a soft circle around us. Outside, night continued its slow turn. Inside, something careful and strong kept forming that I felt the responsibility deepen. Not heavy, honest. She shifted on the couch, more comfortable now that I adjusted my posture so nothing felt rushed. She whispered that she liked this quiet that I told her the quiet could stay for a while. The moment held, patient and unfinished. The quiet settled deeper, like a gentle agreement that I felt it move through my chest and slow my thoughts. She watched the lamp as if memorizing its glow that I asked if the light felt too bright. She shook her head. She said it felt safe. That word rested between us with meaning that I adjusted the blanket slightly, asking with my eyes first. She nodded again. Consent lived in small gestures here that I leaned back and let my shoulders relax. For the first time that evening, my body followed my mind. She asked what I did every day, that I spoke about decisions and pressure and endless responsibility, that I spoke without pride. She listened, curious, not impressed. She asked if it ever felt lonely. The question surprised me with its accuracy that I told her yes, that I told her loneliness could hide behind busy days. She seemed to understand that easily. She said nights felt like that for her too. Different worlds, same quiet ache. That shared understanding bridged something unseen that I asked what helped her when nights felt long. She said, imagining someone was awake somewhere, someone who remembered her. My chest tightened again, slow and deep that I told her she was remembered now, not loudly, not for attention, but truly. She turned her face toward me, searching that I stayed steady under her gaze. She believed me just enough to rest again. Her fingers loosened their grip on the blanket that I noticed the tension leave inch by inch. The clock marked time without urgency that I felt grateful for its patience. That I thought about the choices that led me here, about dinners interrupted and lives redirected that I wondered why it took so long. Then I realized timing mattered less than presence. She shifted again, closer to sleep than before. Her voice came softly, almost a thought. She asked if tomorrow could start slow. That I smiled and answered yes. Slow could be powerful, slow could heal. She breathed out, long and even. That I stayed silent, guarding the quiet. Outside, a car passed and disappeared. Inside, the moment remained that I knew this story was still writing itself, line by line, choice by choice, with care. Care felt like the only language worth speaking now that I watched her breathing settle into a rhythm I could trust. The room seemed to listen with me. That I lowered my voice even more. That I spoke about mornings I once rushed through, about how speed had convinced me it was necessary. She shifted slightly, still listening. That I told her that slow mornings allowed truth to appear. Truth needed space. She nodded without opening her eyes. That I remained where I was, grounded and alert. That a soft hum from the building moved through the walls. That it sounded like life continuing without demand. That I thought about my phone resting silent in my pocket. Unread messages waited there. They felt distant and small. Right now, attention mattered more than urgency. She asked if people ever stayed once they promised. The question arrived gently but carried weight. That I answered that staying required effort every single day. Effort chosen again and again. She seemed satisfied with honesty over comfort. Her breathing deepened further. Sleep stood close, but trust stood closer. That I adjusted my position so the floor would not creak. That I did not want to interrupt anything forming. She opened her eyes briefly and looked at me. That I met her gaze immediately. That I no distraction. That I no impatience. She closed them again. That I felt something settle permanently inside me. Not ownership, responsibility. That I thought about the systems I had built for profit. That I thought about systems that could be rebuilt for people. The work ahead felt large, but meaningful. That I welcomed its size. She murmured something about blue skies again. That I told her blue could wait for morning. The lamp continued to glow steadily. The night outside softened its edges. That I listened to the quiet and stayed present within it. The story continued forward, unfinished and alive. Alive moments carried their own gentle weight. That I felt it in the way the room breathed with us. Her sleep hovered close, but not fully claimed. That I stayed attentive, honoring that space. That a faint light from the hallway traced the floor. That it reminded me that guidance did not need force. That I adjusted the lamp slightly lower. The glow softened without disappearing. She shifted inside, more comfortable now. That I noticed how trust allowed rest to arrive. That I thought about how rarely I allowed myself rest. Success had taught me to stay alert instead. Tonight taught me something quieter. That I listened to the small sounds of the building. Pipes whispered Wood settled, life continued in ordinary ways. She stirred again and spoke. My name. Hearing it sounded different here, less like authority, more like connection. That I answered gently so she would not wake fully. That I told her I was still here. That seemed enough. She turned slightly toward my voice. Her hand rested on the blanket edge. That I noticed how small her fingers looked, yet how strong they had been all night. That I thought about strength that survived without applause, strength that waited quietly to be seen. The clock moved forward, patient and fair. That I considered calling someone for guidance. Then I chose to wait. Some moments asked for presence before planning. That I respected that order. She opened her eyes again, clearer this time. Sleep had refreshed something fragile. She asked if the rain was gone. That I told her the streets were quiet now. She smiled at that image. Quiet streets felt like possibility. She asked if people would judge her. The question carried years inside it. That I answered that some people judged out of fear, others listened out of courage. That I promised to stand with her in both spaces. She studied my face carefully. That I did not look away. That choice felt important. She nodded, accepting effort instead of perfection. The blanket shifted as she sat up slightly. Energy returned in cautious steps. That I felt the night loosen its hold even more. A morning waited somewhere ahead, unrushed, unfinished, ready to be shaped. Morning arrived quietly, without urgency. Light touched the windows and changed everything. That I understood then that wealth is not measured by what you own, but by who you refuse to abandon in a difficult moment. That night taught me to see people instead of circumstances. That IT taught me to listen before deciding, and to understand that true help does not begin with money, but with respect, presence, and an honest heart. The little girl did not ask me for change. She reminded me of humanity. Each of us is given moments where we choose to walk past or to stop, and it is that choice which defines who we become at the end of the day. May we all find the courage to pause, to listen, and to reach out a hand, because kindness given at the right moment can change not only someone else's life, but quietly and forever change our own. Thank you for listening to this heartfelt story. That if it moved you, share it, leave a comment below, and let someone know you are never alone.